the Intermodal Chassis. It's the equipment on which you move the ocean container once the cargo is discharged at a port. It plays a critical role in making an efficient and effective supply chain possible. In this country, the ocean carrier, they have owned the chassis. Everywhere else in the world, either the truck driver owns the chassis or the major retailer, because the ocean carrier owned the equipment and not the truck driver. It creates a lot of unnecessary trips, right? So you've got additional VMTs, so there's an environmental impact. If you're the truck driver and you're paid by the trip and not by the hour, right? You've got a lot of inefficient back and forth. You had valuable real estate down at the ports dedicated to this, chassis storage. So in LA, Long Beach, we've had terminals struggling with long turn times to move containers in and out of the marine terminals. We've had congestion on the yards. The first step was you saw individual ocean carriers companies adopting their own business model. So Maersk decided to transfer ownership of its chassis to a subsidiary. Motor carriers rented the chassis on a daily basis. This was a first step in eliminating that repositioning that was really inefficient. With the incentive to pool the chassis to eliminate the congestion on the docks, you had sort of a couple of different models that were developed. Tremendous potential benefits to these chassis pools, right? You can conserve your assets, you can conserve land, you can sort of rationalize terminal operations in general. It doesn't get to the real challenge at hand of making the supply chain more efficient. We came up with 8 different type of transaction types to see what would happen if you were able to use a pooled chassis or you were using a foreign chassis, to see what impact it had on equipment movement on the terminal. And simply by calculating the additional movements that result in using a foreign chassis, you get a significant increase in the number of total transactions, not only for the truck, but for the chassis, as well as what we call UTRs, which are utility trucks. Current chassis management practices without a cooperative pool have a negative impact on overall container terminal performance in terms of both effective capacity, system operation times, and air emissions. There was no clear pattern that truck turn time increased as the percentage of transactions involving foreign chassis increased. Where you saw the impact was on the overall system runtime. Even in a world where we have chassis pools, but they're pooled on the terminals, it doesn't give us a system-wide impact that's desirable. Finally, the ports worked with the terminal operators and those 3 gray chassis pool operators I mentioned. What happens if all 3 of you contribute chassis to a pool of pools? We get to a higher level of interoperability by combining your independent pooled operations. In fact, it's proving to be a lot more complex than we had thought. Ports, truck drivers, terminal operators, equipment providers see this as a short-term solution. Most people see this moving toward a long-term lease operation where maintenance, repair, ownership would remain with the independent provider, but the truck driver would have a lot more flexibility to use the equipment. Bottom line is we'll know if this pool of pools or chassis pools in general have an impact as to whether it improves turn time for the truckers, and we don't have evidence of that just yet.